One area that's an interest to me is the area of Ormis. I came across this a number of years ago. I was lucky enough to attend a lecture by Barry Carter in 2003. He came from the US, and Barry had spent a lot of time with David Hudson, who has made Ormis famous. And he was a cotton farmer that was struggling to grow cotton because there was this black grey material on his soil that he didn't know much about, that was incredibly alkaline, but it was stopping him growing his cotton. So he decided to get it analysed by Cornell University, and they didn't really tell him what he wanted to hear. That he basically said that he had iron, silicon and aluminium, and he said, well, I don't have that, because when I took this substance and he filtered it and put it out in the sun, he said it disappeared like in a blaze of 1,000 flashlights, and he said he'd never seen a material that could do that. I mean, we know that radioactive materials do that, but certainly he'd never experienced anything like this before. And so he found that when he went to the world's expert in arc emission spectroscopy, which was in West Germany, there was a guy called Siegfried. He did the same test and told him, you've got iron, silicon and aluminium. And he said, look, I want you to do the arc emission spectroscopy in a different way. I've been reading, this is what David Hudson said, he's been reading a journal from the Academy of Sciences in the Soviet Union, and they said that their arc emission spectroscopy goes for 300 seconds, not for 15, because you don't get all of the elements then. And of course he got a bit of protest, because they said, well, you should be able to get all of the boiling points within 15 seconds. What are you going to get after that? So anyway, he decided to go ahead and get this test done at 300 seconds. And then he found that, yes, he got iron, silicon and aluminium in the first 15 seconds, exactly like every other time. But after about 70 seconds, exactly as the Soviet Academy of Sciences said that they would, he started getting osmium and iridium and rhodium and all of the elements, but in a different form. And it was in a monoatomic form. And what he discovered was that if you've got an element, let's take gold for example. Most people know that gold is heavy, it's yellow, and it's fairly soft. But if you take the same gold and you were to heat it really rapidly and then super chill it, like on glass plates, really, really rapidly, so that you take the temperature out of the internal part of the atom, then what happens is that instead of having a lattice of 2 or more atoms of gold forming a metallic lattice, what instead that it does is it dissociates one atom from another, and you get a white powder. So the electron is closer to the nucleus, and it's in a high spin state. And then it's still gold, but it's got different properties. And according to Scientific American, they said that the properties of monoatomic elements are different to any liquids, solids, or gases, or metals that we know of, and they're in a category all of their own. That's what they said. And they have a number of interesting properties. For example, they have the property of being diamagnetic, where they can repel and attract magnets. They can exhibit Schumann tunneling, where you put them into a material and they'll appear on the outside of the material. But the most interesting property is one called superconductivity. And superconductivity has been defined by Scientific American as the most amazing property in the universe. And it's interesting with superconductivity because it means that you can have a fuel cell, for example, that you could charge it up, say in Melbourne, you could take it to Alice Springs, and then you could discharge all of the electricity out of it, and you don't lose any through heat transfer. You transfer 100%. So instead of the electricity going over a copper wire and heating that copper wire, you find that the electrons form what's called a Cooper pair, where they glide over the wire, and when they do that, you get a cold piece of wire that hasn't been heated up at all, and you get 100% of the energy transfer. Now, David Hudson was working for General Electric in the 70s, and they soon discovered that he knew more about monoatomic elements than what they did, their best scientists did, because he spent so much time researching this, that they suggested that he patent the word ORM, orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements. And he did that, and he's still got a patent to that. But then he discovered that name is probably not the most accurate way of describing these elements, because in the case of gold it is, because you need one element and it has to be monoatomic, separate to another atom. But in the case of iridium and rhodium, you can have 5 and 9 atoms and still have a white, or in this case a red powder with iridium and rhodium that is still got the same properties of the monoatomic elements, like being diamagnetic and being a superconductor. So then what they discovered when they they now test using arc emission spectroscopy with a full 300 seconds. They find that the brain is not mostly carbon as a metal in the brain, but rather 5% of it is iridium and rhodium. And so we know that these monoatomic elements are necessary for us. When they go into pristine areas, like in rainforests, for example, or in pristine oceans and areas like that, it seems to be an abundance of monoatomic elements there, even in the fruits and grasses and things that grow there. So it's been theorized that when the Earth was in a more pristine state, that they were abundant everywhere. But with industrialization and so forth, we've created a non-harmonious situation where monoatomic elements aren't present anymore. So that's why I believe that they are of benefit. And one story that I like to tell about monoatomic elements is a study that was done by a gentleman by the name of Sean Adam. Now, Sean Adam runs the Alpha Learning Institute in Switzerland, and he's also been tested as having the 6th highest IQ of all time, and he can read a 300-page book in 24 minutes and remember every word of it. He's tested on it regularly. Anyway, he did an experiment where he had 5 men and 5 women between the ages of 17 and 52, and they were taking monoatomic elements regularly and irregularly. And he found that at the start they had an overactive left hemisphere of the brain, which is the logical side of the brain, and the right side was the creative side, which didn't have a lot of activity. And then after a while, he found that when they were taking the monoatomic elements, the overactive side tended to balance with the underactive side. But then, and that was actually a positive thing, because what happens is when you have that synchronization of left and right hemispheres, that is effectively what geniuses have. They have that characteristic. And then over a period of time, both the left and right sides of the brain increased in magnitude to the side that was overactive at the beginning. And so he found that people's IQ improved, their communication improved, all areas of mental acuity improved dramatically. And his conclusion was, if he was taking any exam, whether it was mental or physical, he'd recommend taking monoatomic elements. He said that the worst that you can see is you'll see a little or no improvement, but potentially you can see a huge improvement.
And are there people that actually produce that?
Yeah, one of the methods that people are using to make Ormis is a method called the wet method, where people go to the ocean and they collect ocean water and then go through a process where they filter it, they add sodium hydroxide, a food grade sodium hydroxide to it, and then let it settle, and over a number of days or weeks you just let it settle out, and then you filter off the residue water, which has got sodium hydroxide and seawater, and then you're left with this white substance, and then you add distilled water to that and mix it up, let it settle. You do that over a period of time, and then you're left with this substance that's mostly calcium hydroxide and magnesium hydroxide, but it's also got the ocean elements in it, all of them, as well as the 13 known monoatomic elements as well. People do a number of different things with the Ormis that they collect. Some people add it to the soil, and they watch their plants grow phenomenally well. In fact, on the subtleenergies.com website, which is Barry Carter's website, you can actually see walnuts double the size of regular walnuts, and you can see apricots and all sorts of fruits, that are much bigger than normal, but they're not big like you would find in a supermarket, where they don't have a lot of flavour. Here they're full of nutrition, but they've just grown with a healthier plant, and so a lot of people are using it for that. The people are using it on their sprouts and getting really great results that way. So that's certainly one way of using monoatomic elements. Some people have experimented ingesting it as well, and and found some benefits. So there's certainly a number of different ways of using monoatomic elements. I have had some sprouts with Ormis put on them, and and I found some benefit, and I believe it not only helps with the growth of the food, but you actually notice that there is a benefit when you're ingesting it, definitely.